Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring you latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. Now, after a number of difficult weeks, conditions appear to be turning the corner and may provide an opportunity to get grazing back on track. We're joined in this episode by Dr Philip Creighton to discuss some of the key steps in order to achieve this over the coming weeks. We discussed the grazing targets, fertiliser type and application rates for the coming weeks, with Philip emphasising the need to boost supplies that appear to very high demand on farms. He also highlights the need to put a plan in place to make a proportion of high quality silage and replenish stocks that were depleted this spring. We finish up the episode discussing grazing groups, batching up and terrescency periods in grazing paddocks. We start off, however, with Philip highlighting the impact that the recent conditions have had on sheep systems.
Yeah, sure. Look, Kieran, it's been a very challenging 6 weeks, really, I suppose, getting through lambing. And we talk about grazing management a lot and that, but it's been a case of surviving the last while. And in terms of it's been extremely difficult, whether on young lambs, trying to get shelter, and even with shelter, driving rain and wind and frost and snow in places. So it's been about surviving and just trying to alter the plan as much as possible. Grass utilization was poor. Sheep were marking ground, never mind cattle. So it's been about really just trying to get through as best we can. Thankfully, the sun is starting to shine again now, so it's about maybe trying to regroup and get back to where we should be, or trying to get back on track, I suppose, from where we've come from.
No, I think it looks something we touched on before. Any of us would have swapped February for March weather, so we would. It was extremely difficult. I suppose, and this is a bit of a generalisation, but there is variation right across the country. In terms of where we are at the moment, it's going to have to depend on how we got through grazing, whether we had enough supply or not. And again, as you touched on, utilisation was extremely poor. Maybe just to recap on some of it, at this stage of the season, we're now in the middle of April. From a grazing point of view, Philip, we're talking we should really be in the second rotation. Many will be there, not necessarily by choice, but in a more ideal scenario, Philip, you might just set the scene for us. Where should we be from a grazing point of view at the moment for early March lambing flocks?
As you say there, Kieran, I suppose in a normal situation, a lot of flocks for March lambing flocks would have been kind of getting into the end of their first grazing rotation, starting their second grazing rotation now. I suppose due to the way the weather was, I suppose in a lot of cases maybe there was delayed turnout. Sheep, a lot of sheep had to be held in sheds, where they were available, for longer periods in March. Then when they did go out, it wasn't so simple, maybe rotating them around, and changes had to be made there. So again, as you say, there's big variation. Some farms, I suppose, were able to, keep grazing, within reason to some sort of planned degree. Other farms maybe not so much. A lot of supplement had to go in, and look, rightly, yaws were under pressure. There was a good bit of tetany around in that in the cold weather. So if there was grass on the farm, maybe there's still some grass built up ahead of them. But then with utilization being so bad, sheep were moving through the farm faster, maybe in a lot of cases, just trying to reduce damage and keep grass into them. So it's going to have to be a kind of assess where you're at. Where are you compared to where you'd normally be? What sort of grass is available? I suppose something that was occurring out on farms. There was very little fertiliser spread so far, and to be fair, that was due to the weather in a lot of cases. We couldn't really spread. There was no real available weather for spreading for the most of the month of March, and really for April up until now. The last couple of days maybe things have improved. But that wasn't there. So I suppose, again, depending on farms, maybe some farms in drier areas might have got a little bit out the end of February, early March, before the weather broke. If they didn't really have a chance up to now. So that's going to have a knock-on effect. There could be, very low grass covers available on some farms. And that's something we're going to have to address as well,
So we have that bit of a mixture in this. We've ones that were able to hold up maybe for longer, maybe aren't well through that first rotation, and for a lot then it was a case of chasing their tail, getting through it. Yeah. And the fact the fertiliser ones out there, that regrowth is slowed. If we maybe just talk about the fertiliser story for a minute. So look, March was a write-off for the vast majority. February, we had dry conditions, maybe a bit early. Some didn't go kind of hedging their bets. And again, there was in reality in the market that price drop we've seen in fertiliser in anticipation that probably slowed up purchasing on farms as well. Certainly, maybe they didn't go with as much as they would have in previous years. In situations, Philip, where there hasn't been spread yet or minimal fertiliser has been spread, that is going to have started to restrict growth at this stage of the season. We have an opportunity, if this weather's improving now, to go with it. Talk to me a little bit about how much we're going, what kind of response we're going to see at the moment, and the need to go with fertiliser at this stage as demand starts to increase.
Yeah, so that's it exactly, Kieran. So I suppose if in situations where fertiliser hasn't gone out, there may have been a certain amount of grass available. That is definitely going to be requiring nitrogen at this stage. Now, as temperatures rise and as growth potential increases, you have your moisture, you have your longer day length. Now you have your improved temperatures. So the limiting factor will be nitrogen. So I suppose look at again, depending on stocking rates and demands and that, but you'd be looking at the requirement for somewhere between 15 to 25 units to the acre. Somewhere between your 20 to 30 kilos to the hectare of nitrogen really needs to be going out onto grazing ground to try and match, requirements for to get that grass growing. And I suppose we have to remember that we're in the middle of April now. We could have if we don't capitalize on kind of what happens in April, May and June, that's our peak growing months. And if we miss that window, that's going to have an impact as we move into maybe talking about conserving silage for next winter. And we could argue we're still not out of this winter, but we have to be thinking ahead. And the fear, I suppose, will be that with tight grass supplies on many farms, not much fertilizer spread up to date, that that'll push out silage harvesting as well for winter feed, and we could have an issue on our hands going into next winter. So we need to be conscious of that as well.
No, and I think it's an important point you touched on. I'm very conscious when we're talking about this that there is still stock likely in a lot of places, particularly mixed farms with cattle as well. There's still silage being fed, and look, in some cases, ground conditions still aren't just suitable at the moment to go with it. But there needs to be a plan in place this week on. We need to start planning getting this out and looking at pushing on grass.
Yeah, and I suppose the thing to remember then, absolutely we need to get fertilizer out to keep grass in front of us for grazing. The silage, it is maybe getting a little bit later now, whether it's going to take a bit longer for ground to dry out depending on where people are in that. So I suppose we have to be conscious then of making a plan in terms of, what are we going to cut, when are we going to cut it, making sure that we've planned ahead to have some amount of high quality silage made. The risk would be, I suppose, that we're late putting out fertilizer for silage, which means we're late cutting for silage, which knock-on effects in terms of silage quality. So it may be now that we select an area and we say, right, we're going to reduce back the fertilizer a bit, maybe 60 to 80 units to still target that cutting by the end of May, that we have some high quality stuff. And maybe then if we have to allow some area to bulk up another bit, depending on stock type and requirement, that would be something that we could look at now this week, that we don't leave ourselves with a late silage harvest of lower quality feed and have no high quality feed, which has a knock-on effect in terms of the concentrate build for next winter as well.
And you touched on something else, like stocks on a lot of farms are going to be dwindled, if not depleted in a lot of cases. So there is the need to put that back again.
Yeah.
You touched there on the amount and the rate going out. The type of fertiliser we use at the moment, Philip, any comment on that or suggestions?
Well, sure, I suppose, look at it, price is still an issue, and people rightly, I suppose, were holding back maybe a little bit early on in terms of committing to, the higher prices. Prices have come back to a certain degree in most areas now. Look, they're still not back to where we would have been 2 years ago, but at this stage now, it's still a cheaper alternative to be putting out fertilizer where it's needed than leaving ourselves either tight on grass for grazing and having to put in high levels of concentrate, which is also quite high in price, or leaving ourselves tight for winter feed for next winter. So in terms of value, look at your protected urea is still on a per unit of nitrogen basis, it's still better value. You could be over 30% cheaper per unit of nitrogen buying your protected urea product versus the likes of your traditional canned product or whatever. I suppose depending on P and K requirements and that, we can get some of these protected urea products now with K in them as well. So if you have your soil test done and you know that you have K requirements there, or you have your K requirements for your silage ground, which cutting any ground where we're cutting and removing for conservation, that's going to have a high K requirement. So we could incorporate some of that and get better value. They're all expensive, but some of them are going to give you more value than others. And then I suppose some of your, to get maybe some sulfur out as well in terms of your requirements for that, both for your grazing and your silage ground as well.
And that's important. Like we're talking about going production, we're looking to protect urea and then targeting the compounds based on need. And as you touched on there, sulfur is something that has shown to be more increasingly important in recent years. Something we need to put more effort into.
Yeah, and I suppose maybe if we go back a number of years, like maybe there wasn't as big of an emphasis on it. I suppose we've moved on a long way in the environmental space. Maybe there's not much sulfur emissions or that going on anymore in some of the areas that maybe we traditionally would have had some deposition or whatever. So, there is a requirement there for it, and where it's not applied, you probably are limiting the efficiency of your nitrogen that you're applying. So you just have to watch the amounts that's going out there as well.
Look, you mentioned this earlier on. We're heading into peak growing months. We need to really capitalise late April, early May, start of June. We have to capitalise on that growth. In terms of demand from the sheep point of view, though, Philip, like lambs at this stage, we're looking 7-8 week old lambs. In some cases, they're starting to push on. The demand in those grazing groups is going to increase. I know there might be this anticipation when growth takes off, it'll go out of control. But our demand within the grazing groups is going to really rocket on. For farms that may be tight at the moment, there will be a little bit of chasing their tail if we don't have that to drive it on.
Yeah, and I suppose we're hitting peak. We're starting to hit the peak demand for grass now because, as you say, Kieran, yos have kind of gone past peak milk in a lot of cases, are at it now for, depending on when the land, whether it was early March or mid-March, you're kind of hitting the peak there now in terms of milk production. But the lambs then are going to start eating more grass, and where the yow's demand might drop a little bit as she comes off peak milk, the lamb's demand is only going to keep increasing. So we're really from now on, mid-April to weaning time, really, you're going to have a fairly consistent high demand there for grass. If we're in a tight situation at the moment and people feel that they're going to be chasing their tail and they're going to run out of grass or whatever, the supplement maybe to slow things down a little bit. And again, that's going to depend on if we're at the point where yos were more early March lambing and they're gone past peak milk, that supplement is better going into lambs in the form of creep feed or whatever. If yos were slightly later lambing in March and they're still going to get a response from supplement feed, maybe that's enough to slow them down for a week or two to allow this better conditions to let grass get a little bit ahead of us. Then maybe that's the appropriate strategy to take. But I suppose people are going to have to assess, and I suppose, I know everybody's not into maybe measuring grass and that, but at the moment we'd be saying that we need about 15 to 20 days ahead of us in terms of feed available on the farm in terms of grass. So a lot of us will be able to maybe tell how many days we get with a group of sheep on a particular field, even without putting very exact figures on it. And I suppose if we're below that if we ballpark at the moment, we say 3 weeks, allowing that conditions are improving a lot and temperatures are coming up a lot, that will reduce down. We'd want to be on the lower end of that 15 days, maybe by the end of the month. But just make a call on that, and you're better to slow things down a little bit and give it time to recover than to run out of grass completely, because it'll take twice as long to get back on track then.
No, we have to bear in mind we have to start closing up ground for silage as well.
And we have to get silage ground closed up as well, exactly. So I mean, it's not just that we have all the ground available. We need to make sure we've all the bases covered.
Yeah, I think there's that fear of things getting ahead at the moment, but look, closing it off, whether it be for bills, I know not everywhere suitable, but where you have suitable areas, close them out. There's a solution at that end of it. There's a better way to be than on the tight side of things. Just maybe in terms of grazing targets, just let's hope, fingers crossed, we get normal conditions resuming, this drier weather coming in. Take me through pre-grazing, post-grazing, kind of target residency period at the moment, Philip.
Yeah, so I suppose again, under normal conditions, you'd be saying ideally going in there around 8 centimeters, somewhere around 1,200 kilos, coming out. Look, the ideal, and this is where it's going to be different this year, the ideal would have been that we would have been grazing down to 3.5 or 4 centimeters for the first rotation to kind of clean out the base of the sward and set it up for now on, you know, as we say, as lambs start grazing, to make sure that it's clean regrowths. In a lot of cases, that just wasn't possible. It was a case of just keep the sheep moving, you know, don't let them damage ground, you know, keep them fed in mucky, wet conditions. So there's going to be a fair bit of maybe having to go back over ground and trying to graze them out, maybe to that kind of level now to get the clean regrowth again for the subsequent rotation. So it's going to be a kind of an assess what each field is like really, or what happened to them in the previous grazing, and just try and get them cleaned out as best as you can in this. Hopefully this drier weather will stay, and that will encourage, you know, good clean leafy regrowth for subsequent rotations when lambs are really going to be consuming high amounts of grass.
It's going to have a big impact on quality in subsequent rotations.
Yeah, and like the thing about it at the moment is that where, you know, grass wasn't cleaned out or whatever, that if that's not cleaned out again now on the second grazing, it could start getting quite stemmy and poor quality very quickly. So
yeah, you're going to have to address it in other means.
Yeah.
So I suppose, Philip, look, our first focus is, if the weather conditions are there, fertiliser hasn't gone out, it's something we need to address now. Probably one other area to touch on is looking at that grazing setup. Well, that will have gone maybe with the first dose or going with it. You know, they need to start batching up, getting the grazing rotation established. Maybe it wasn't that easy in that bad weather in March. You know, those groups maybe spread around that normally would have been grouped earlier, but that's going to have a knock-on impact too on getting that graze outs achieved and keeping that level of performance and that residency period achieved.
Definitely, Kieran, yeah, and I suppose look at, we said it at the start there, I think the rule book was thrown out the window really the last few weeks in terms of, you know, we'd be saying bash up and that, but it was a case of trying to keep lambs alive, and that was, you know, get them shelter wherever you could and maybe minimise the pressure on wetter ground, and that maybe grouping up wasn't maybe the easiest thing to do. But again, I suppose the quicker we can group up now as conditions improve, it'll make it easier to manage the grass, and it'll make it easier to maximise the regrowths as well, in terms of as we get through ground. What we don't want is sheep everywhere, because again, it'll slow the regrowths if people are under pressure. So again, it's reacting to the conditions now as best we can, and hopefully we can get back on track.
Yeah, fingers crossed, maybe the second half of April will be a bit kinder to us. Philip, look, good having you on.
Thanks, Kieran.
Okay, we'll leave it there for this week's episode. As Philip has highlighted, it's important we get things back on track. Hopefully conditions continue to improve, and it'll help us achieve this. Having a plan in place for your fertiliser applications, closing up for silage, and getting your grazing group set up are some of the key steps we need to focus on for the coming weeks. That's it for me for this episode. Again, for updates on our sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more episodes.